Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another week of Game Wisdom Live. This is going to be for the week of May 6, 2018. As always, joining me is my co-host, video game producer, Robert Leach. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am doing in the middle right now. We are officially in spring, which means my allergies are at their peak suffering.
Oh,
So
goodness.
chances are I'm going to be blowing my nose a lot over however long this stream/video is going to be. Do you
I'll
suffer from
try and
allergies?
I used to, but I'll try and like cause a distraction when you do that.
You're gonna need a lot of distractions there, Rob.
Okay.
You're gonna need like the carrot top trunk there, just random
Oh boy.
gags.
Well, I'm in a closet, so that's there's plenty of things around for me to, play around with.
But while we're waiting for folks to get on, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm doing well. Still overworked, but that's okay.
Is your project finally released?
It is. As of last Tuesday, we had our first it's a unique one. So we did an esport, and the first public game was last Tuesday
Nice.
on Twitch.
And how's it going so far? You got any like interesting metrics? Is it being received well?
Well, yeah, it's okay. So I don't know if you're aware of this particular esport. It's been out there, NBA 2K League. So it's NBA 2K 18, basically. That is now an esport, and it's been let's see, they have 17 professional teams that have generated squads of 6 guys, 5 players and an alternate, and yeah, they started playing. They're all salaried up and playing games. They had their first kind of preseason tournament this last week. It ended yesterday, and it did pretty well. I mean, it did well for what it is, and it being its first time, and it being this weird kind of combination of more mainstream sport with esport, and it's just, we're seeing how it goes, and it's I'm excited about it.
Great, congratulations on getting it out, and best of luck with seeing it grow.
Yeah, thanks so much.
But I guess for me, if you missed the announcement earlier this week, I've officially signed the contract for my book deal. So I now have just about over a month and a half to finish everything up and get it sent over, and hopefully by the end of the year it will be out and available for people to buy.
That is very exciting.
It sure is. Now comes the nightmare of having to find all the images and get them released from various people so that we can use them for the book.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be a pain.
hmm Right now, in terms of the actual writing, it's about, I'm almost done with the second draft. I'm going over everything one more time. So it's going to be about, I think, like 24,000 words when everything is all said and done, maybe a little bit more than that. And
Nice.
hopefully they'll like it, because once this is done, then they're going to send it back to me for edits and whatnot. And then after that, get everything done with the images, and we're good to go.
El Gordo. No, that's very exciting. I can't wait to buy my copy and then start reading it.
Hey, Alberto, how are you doing? If you're just coming in, like I said, my allergies are at peak annoyance, so I'm going to be constantly going off screen while I blow my nose. I think I'm going to need a distraction right now.
All right, so I don't know any good songs, so I'll just kind of try and talk while Josh blows his nose. How's it going, El Gordo? What's new?
Oh, it's going to be one of those. I'm afraid it's going to be one of those bad seasons for allergy. I just got my shot like 3 days ago, and I'm just wondering if it would have been any worse if I didn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
But with that said, there is a lot to talk about what's been going on. So, in terms of the news going on with the game industry, there hasn't been a lot in terms of like, oh my god, crazy stuff. I know it looks like they tried to do an item trading for PUBG that was shut down because people were
I
abusing it, which
saw
sounds
that.
very familiar to everything else.
Hold on, sorry, I got a AVG pop up, so done. Okay. Yeah, no, that is weird. I don't know. What is the future of PUBG? I'm curious. Is there? Do you think it's going to start going down? I know my opinion is that it's going to be second fiddle and maybe worse over time. What are your thoughts on that one?
I think unless they do something to spice it up, it's going to be kind of looked at as, the lesser to Fortnite. Because I know Fortnite just released a massive update, I think, a few days ago. They went to their next season of items, and there still hasn't really been all that much from PUBG. They added in the desert map after like a year and a half, but again, it's like, why? Like, why should we be playing this game? Like, what's coming down that's actually changing it?
Yeah, it's hard. Fortnite has gobs and gobs of money to throw into it. Even if I can't imagine either one is making a ton of money. Maybe Fortnite's starting to get there, but given the amount of money that's been poured into both projects, I think Fortnite can weather that storm until it actually starts, making everything back and more.
Mm-hmm. And again, in terms of the publicity standpoint, Fortnite is just doing a massive amount of work these days. I mean, you go on YouTube and search gaming live streams, it's like every 3 streams is going to be a Fortnite play.
Yeah, and every time I go on Twitch and I start looking for games to watch, Fortnite's number one. It's been number one every time I've looked the last week.
Yeah. And it's going to be very interesting to see just how much is going to keep going when it comes to... Sorry, allergies are just really bad, like I said. It's going to be very interesting to see just what it is PUBG can do. I guess here's a question for you, Rob, and for the chat. What could they reasonably add to that game? Like, what could they do to make it stand out?
Personally, I don't know, because I mean, I have not played PUBG. I've just watched it. I've watched Fortnite, and the most glaring difference is that PUBG looks very, Well, Fortnite has a very definitive, has very definitive visuals, has the ability to just pump out versions and items and all that stuff. And if PUBG starts getting involved in some of these, the store, the item store, if they take that down, like, where are they getting their money from? Like, it seems like that would be a huge, very important thing for them to figure out.
And I think one of the bigger points is that, as we've said, we're seeing a lot more Battle Royale style games this past year, or I'm sorry, past half year, and then probably into the end of this year. And they're all going to have one advantage that PUBG doesn't, and that is they're being started from that foundation, so they can really pivot into a unique selling point compared to PUBG, which is kind of stuck. Like, they can't go in cartoony graphics because then they're going to be accused of stealing from Fortnite. They can't really add in, space battles or robots because that'll betray the original foundation for that game. But everybody else, and this is it's kind of a reverse World of Warcraft now that I think about it. World of Warcraft kind of set the foundation when they kind of blew up, and everybody was trying to chase after them. But Blizzard kept growing that game to the point that nobody was really able to chase them. With PUBG, while they set the foundation, they really haven't done anything to break away. So now everybody is kind of, overlapping them, I guess, in a matter of speaking, in terms of what they're bringing to the genre.
Well, but that's just it. Like, what came before PUBG for them? For that company, what came before PUBG that gave them the money, that gave them the foundation to be able to, like I was saying earlier, weather the storm of growth, especially given a competitive environment where everybody now is jumping into that bandwagon. Like, everybody is. And PUBG is probably going to be able to weather it as the original and as one that has, a dedicated fan base. But then you got Fortnite, which basically anyone who's never heard of PUBG has heard of Fortnite.
Oh, yes.
And is playing that. So to me, it's like Angry Birds did that. I can't remember the name of the original version, but Angry Birds just stole it, but they polished it up. They put all their money behind it because they had worked on games before. It was basically an indie mobile game that just got ripped off and had forgotten over the course of time. Yeah. So I'm not going to say this is the same thing because PUBG obviously had money. It had a huge amount of marketing, and I don't mean like they spent money on all the marketing. The word of mouth was tremendous, and they managed to pull an award out of their hat last year, which just shocked a lot of people. So they did. They managed to do everything to hit that, like, it's seemingly very perfect set of circumstances. But Fortnite just has, the backing, the money, the big names behind it, like the studio, all that stuff.
Yep. And I mean, the only one who's really kind of been like floundering has been that Radical Heights from the Mayors of Lawbreakers with Cliffy B. And again, they're trying to go after PUBG, but the problem is that there just really isn't all that meat to PUBG compared to Fortnite. And you can't really compete with Fortnite because, again, it goes back to the whole World of Warcraft situation. Why should someone play your Fortnite clone when they can play Fortnite? And as we've seen before, it's only going to get harder and harder as Fortnite continues to grow in terms of depth, content, and of course publicity. I mean, the fact that people are still talking about these big name streamers and YouTubers who play Fortnite. I mean, when's the last time you heard someone mention like a big name PUBG player?
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like that the whole celebrity trend kind of issue where all the big people, you pretty much are following like a gold rush, and they're all going to Fortnite, and until someone makes a game to beat Fortnite, they're all going to stay there, and it's just going to continue to get bigger. But I guess the question is, what could someone do to now beat Fortnite? I mean, where do you kind of go with this kind of battle royale genre? The only thing I could think of is some kind of vehicular style, or cars, ships, boats, you name it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. If you go after Fortnite, I think it's one of those things where you cannot beat it, you can compete with it. So you kind of throw down your spin on the battle royale genre, and you do what you can, make it your own. Maybe make it a lot more community friendly. Like, not community friendly, but like allow the community to get involved in the actual making and that kind of stuff to bring more excitement. I don't know. But genre can play a part, setting can play a part. Like you say, the vehicular thing sounds cool. Just kind of step away from the when someone looks at Fortnite and someone looks at PUBG, you just basically say, well, this is kind of similar. This one looks better though and has some unique features. But you got to add your own unique features, and you probably should have a name behind you to be able to make it. Which I think now, if you do have a decent battle royale game, you could probably pitch it to a major publisher.
Oh yes.
Yeah, not that these games are easy to put together, but I don't know how it would happen, but it would really just be trying to compete, not take over.
Yeah, and again, despite that, we're going to see plenty of developers, I'm sure, going to try to do that. And I think just like the MMO genre, really, there's already another one. And I think just like the MMO genre, we're going to see a lot of studios crash and burn trying to be the next Fortnite. Yeah. And something tells me Epic Games has no intention of, quietly letting Fortnite die in the near future. That'll be like Blizzard saying, we don't want to work on World of Warcraft anymore. We're just going to let that one go.
Yeah, just pull the plug on it, and no one's going to care. That is true. That is true. Lots of games are trying to add battle royale features. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out.
Now, I guess as a quick segue for a second, I want to let you guys know I've updated the Patreon for the month of May. There are some new $50 goals on there, including a multiplayer game night option, as well as doing a live Let's Play of Diablo 2, as possibly something we could do on the stream. Because it's been a very long time since I played Diablo 2. What about you, Rob?
Oh, yes. No, it has been... I don't even know if I've really played it for very long, but it was when it came out, maybe a couple of years after. It's been a long time. The Diablo series, for some reason, maybe it's one of those things where it's that what we're just talking about, the PUBG Fortnite thing. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to ignore the original, and I'm going to go with all these others. That's just what I've been focusing on, like Torchlight 1, Torchlight 2, and now you've gotten me, of course, into Grim Dawn and those. So,
And I'm also trying a new thing Sunday night. We're going to try and do like a classic game night. So last week I played Another World, or Out of This World in the United States, and we spent the stream trying to beat a classic game from 1990. I think it was 2.
Well, I remember that. I'm trying to picture what the game looks like. I want to go. I feel like I need to go on your channel because I totally remember Out of This World that I liked it, and I can't remember anything about it right now. It's just the title. I remember it being very like artistically unique.
Yeah.
That's about it.
That's good.
Oh, shoot. Sorry, I remember. It's like that kind of mocap, that motion capture style. Very not pixelated graphics, but kind of flat colors. I don't know. I'm just trying to remember it in my head, and I remember that game. Very, sorry, I'm talking like my thought process is going into the microphone right now as I try to remember this game that I used to love.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It had that very unique, like, it's kind of hard to describe that aesthetic. It's like very flat,
Yes.
but at the same time it has like some kind of depth to it. And they released the 20th anniversary, so you can play with some HD style graphics, which doesn't really help the character models, but the backgrounds look a lot better.
That's cool because the backgrounds already look pretty good.
So I'm going to try to do like a classic game every Sunday night and see if people will be interested in voting for them via the Patreon. So I have no idea what I'm going to do for tonight's game, though. I have to go through my GOG catalog. And pivoting back around, what King said, I think that's also very true, that if we start to see the major consoles start putting their money behind a Battle Royale game, that will certainly do some major effects of the market there. Again, it's all about the branding, I think, at this point, because the basic gameplay, that can easily be copied. But just El Gordo beat me to it. Just have a Battle Royale of all the Nintendo characters. Throw in Amiibo support there, and, you know, Nintendo could be printing money for the next year or two.
Well, Smash Brothers BR, Mario Kart BR, but like, why wouldn't they just re-release Twisted Metal and do that vehicular one? I mean, that to me is the original. Well, it's not obviously not the original, but that was my favorite when I was growing up. Twisted Metal.
Yep. And I mean, the branding is certainly there. I mean, pick any major console and you could probably throw it together, or any major company. Do a God of War Battle Royale. I'm sure Ubisoft is probably looking at something with the For Honor. I mean, that could certainly be a hand-to-hand focused Battle Royale game. It would certainly go in a different direction.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to see where this is all going to go. Like you said, you called it at the beginning of the year. This year is the Battle Royale year. We'll see what happens. Kingdom Royale.
Let's see. In terms of games that we've been playing that's been coming out, I just got a press key for the latest Shantae game, which I'm going to try and do hopefully on the stream in a few days. I really want to play Battletech and Frostpunk, but they're just on the edge of breaking my computer when I try to play them.
How is Frostpunk? Like, I keep
haven't
seeing
had a
stuff
chance
for
to
it, and
play
it looks
it.
interesting.
The second I load it up, my computer starts to... I hear smoke and fire coming from my computer.
The only thing I remember from that, and I can't even remember the specifics. I'd have to load up Steam, but it claims itself as the first type of this game when it obviously is not. Let me see if I can get up the ad for it. This is very exciting. Josh is blowing his nose, and I'm searching stuff online.
Riveting content here for everyone watching.
Yeah. Oh,
hi, Hugo. But Frostpunk seems to be doing relatively well. I know other people are having computer issues with that game just to how intensive it is. But yeah, I would love to play that. At some point, I'm just going to have to buckle down and buy all new computer parts. Because I would love to do streamings of like XCOM and XCOM 2, but that's also right on that edge there.
Yeah, you just got to get a sponsorship.
There you go.
Sponsored by Alienware.
And we could do some marketing with the Josh boxes too.
The Josh boxes, exactly.
Let's just pretend this is a Battle Royale channel and just pitch it that way. That will get people to sponsor.
We'll just title everything Fortnight. Just title everything Fortnite and just don't even refer to it during your casts. That'll make it popular. Put
that Victory Royale at the bottom of all the thumbnail art. Doesn't matter if it has to do with it or not. Buying of Isaac, Victory Royale. Let's play. I know. Let's play the Lost Vikings, Victory Royale.
Oh, there you go, Josh Royale.
hmm And I'm sure we'll get like 500,000 views, and then they'll immediately turn off. I'll be like, wait a minute, this has nothing to do with Fortnite. There you go, perfect, Algardo.
That's a great
Fortnite.
idea. You just came up with the new indie game. It's a cook serve delicious, but last man standing.
hmm Speaking of which, I spoke to the developer of that this past week. We did a recorded cast with him, so that'll go
Oh,
up in
cool.
a few weeks.
That is cool. I did like that game.
It was very interesting to talk about what he saw in terms of people looking at the first game compared to the second one, because he did change the progression model, and that was a major dividing point for a lot of fans.
Yeah, I need to, I'm gonna write that down because I need to go back and buy that. I really liked the first one. I played it a lot. I actually have to go back to playing it.
hmm
And then the second one is is very interesting to me.
Yeah, and he's releasing hopefully his free update to it next month, the barista update.
Oh, cool. Did he mention what he used to make it? Because I had some thought. Like, did he use his own engine or did he use like a game maker?
I think he used Game Maker for it.
That's what I thought. Because that to me is like should be the cover story of Game Maker. It's like because that game, while it certainly looks like it was made using something like that, because it's got it's relatively simplistic in how it looks and how it feels, but he uses it in a very different way, and it is like a perfect example of that of what you can do with even relatively
Hmm.
low powered engine to make a great game. Like it's about its design and its playability, and it has a very unique look to it, and he finished it and he made it polished and look great, which is for a game maker game is a rarity. It's kind of a this like a diamond in the rough.
hmm And he talked about how if the first Cooks Are Delicious didn't do well, that would have kind of been it for his company. So it's very interesting, just again, as you just said, Rob, about being able to iterate and polish that kind of design to the point that it really stands out. And it's very hard for developers to do that, especially when it's a very interesting or very different kind of design.
Yeah, yeah, no, it was. I mean, I'll admit I like those kind of cooking arcadey games, and I play a lot of them on my mobile phone. But when this came out, I was like, oh, this is interesting. He's going to target this at a more hardcore market, and he did very well with that.
hmm
And the way it played, I totally agree. It was a unique take, and it did match his audience.
Yep. And he said like how he wanted to approach it for that kind of challenging aspect from the get go. And I think what's very crazy about that kind of design, any idea how that beat 'em up? Oh yeah, is that one we played on the stream like a few months ago, Eduardo? But while he's answering, it's very interesting about being able to kind of iterate on that design with Cooks Are Delicious too. And he says that he may be making a third game.
Oh,
And
cool.
it's going to be very telling to see how he goes from 1 to 2 to 2 to 3. Because he kind of dialed back the management side with Cooks Are Delicious too. And that was kind of one of the things a lot of people really want to see more of. And I'm just wondering again just how much there really is in that kind of design. Because if we go up to number 3, that's going to be 3 different games, all with that same kind of gameplay loop.
Well, obviously, he just needs to make it battle royale.
Exactly.
That was the whole thing that brought this up. He needs to make it battle royale. No, it really is. It's about growing it in a bunch of different ways, like you say, that management mode. I mean, that's it. You focus on those side features that kind of round out the game and make it deeper and deeper and deeper, and that's how you generate sequels. It's weird to have a sequel that doesn't add to the core concept of the original. So you can keep that core engine and stuff because I think that's what made it great. But Battle Chef Brigade, I like that. But he just taking that gameplay and then adding more to it because the gameplay is what made it great, and everything else is just going to be, gravy.
hmm I'm looking up that Battleship Brigade. Looks like they just released an update to the game a few days ago, but it looks like it is kind of slow because there's only, I think, like 3 people working at the studio.
Oh, great. Okay? This goes back to our discussion of indie versus like not indie. 3 people sounds like indie, and I don't know if I call indie a studio.
But yeah, they're still moving along. Maybe we can play that at some point too. But again, it's just very curious to see how these games are going to keep going. And what's very funny is when I talked to him about Cooks Are Delicious, he actually said that one of his previous jobs was as a barista, so he's using that kind of knowledge when it comes to the barista update.
That's very cool.
But I think with that said, anything else going on game related wise? I was trying to look it up on Gamma Sutra, and let's see what we got. Surviving Mars is still doing alright. I really want to try that one out, but they did not send me a press key for it. So hopefully I'll be able to get one, or get it when it's on sale, probably in a few months. Let's see. Oh, here's something interesting. Activision released, this was a few days ago, on a conference call. They said they're kind of nervous about Battle Royale with the escape for Call of Duty coming out later this year. And there's been reports that they're thinking about doing a Battle Royale mode for Call of Duty next.
And that's just it. Like, I don't understand why that isn't just a match made in heaven. Like any of those games, any of those first-person shooters, all the maps are there. Just all you have to do is add everyone. When you die, it's permadeath. Instead of respawning, you're just out. I don't see why that. I don't see how that's a super difficult thing to integrate. Certainly, there's balance issues, but if you want a cheap way of doing it, just turn that on and adjust it later.
Yeah, and I think they're just worried about the fact that Call of Duty has kind of become set in its ways in terms of that kind of multiplayer architecture. And they've been banging on that with each yearly iteration. Even though they have the studios kind of excuse me, switching on and off, it's going to get to that point where, what are they going to do? They may actually have to cancel a year of Call of Duty to completely switch things around. But then they're going to have to get all the studios on that different page.
Yeah, again, I don't know if it's that. Now, certainly adding new functionality is never a walk in the park, but it's not like a full-on release. It could be a half, like a 1.5 or whatever, that you release as a mod or add-on later in the development cycle. But like, their game is already kind of that. And if they want to turn it into Battle Royale, it certainly, like I said, does require some design and stuff, but it shouldn't be. They can explore it very easily. Just using what they have and then balance it later. I'm not saying they release a half-assed product, but at the same time, if they want to introduce Battle Royale and they don't want to spend all their time on it, they can do that if they want.
And like we said, it's going to be hard to see just where things are going to be by the end of the year in terms of who will be will anyone conquer Fortnite, or will it kind of be, again, like a World of Warcraft situation where Fortnite is the top dog and everybody else is just trying to chase after it for scraps?
Yeah, it's I think just like World of Warcraft, it's not like you're chasing after for scraps. Like you build something else and build a community from that, and you just enjoy that community. Because of course, just like with any big product, there's people who are just going to hate it just for the hell of it.
Yeah.
And they'll just take whatever competitor there is, and that's their thing. And that's how you do. That's how you survive, and that's even how you can grow on that. Anytime if Fortnite makes a mistake, if they piss off their audience, you're there. And yeah, I guess that is picking up scraps. Now that I think about it.
But I think with that said, let's move on to another topic. First off, for those of you watching this live, I have don't make a raggle heights. Yep, that's another proof right there. I've updated the spreadsheet for the grab bag voting. There it is. And if you guys have any suggestions for games to do for the Let's Play, let me know. Because we haven't had too many people come out to the streams, and it's kind of weird. Like, it's been very quiet doing the Let's Plays. Have you been doing any streaming lately, Rob?
No, again, I I've still been trying to get back into the swing of things on my own like personal time side. So it looks like we're already jumping into another project. So it's gonna be fun trying to get that anything going on the side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we were trying to finish Hollow Knight, and nobody's really been interested in that, so we've been doing Binding of Isaac. And I need to cough, so 1 second.
I do like Binding of Isaac. I have to go back and play that.
Yeah,
I beat it twice. I haven't gotten like to beating it to the point where I've actually beaten the whole game.
Yeah, they just added in another free content patch, so there's all new items and such.
Great. Every time I think I'm close,
you're never going to finish that game.
Yeah, they just move the milestone.
Mm-hmm. But with that said, let's see what crazy games are coming out on for the new releases. As our new continuing section of the weirdness of the game industry.
Yeah.
Let's see. Nothing crazy yet. That's a good sign. Woodstock 1969. Okay, that doesn't sound too bad. Let's see. Save Her from Dreams. So far, nothing like last week. Game called Let's Go Nuts.
But what is Let's Go Nuts about? Because that could be a cooking game about all nuts. Who knows?
Let's see. Where was it? Isaac is the World of Warcraft roguelikes. Yeah, that could certainly be it. We haven't yet had that game to make me go away from Binding of Isaac. I just played this roguelike called Juicy Realm the other night, and a game called City of Brass. And they're both roguelike-ish, but they don't have that variance that I'm looking for. Let's see. Looks like you're a squirrel collecting nuts in that game, Let's Go Nuts. Alright, here's a game for you, and this is an actual game being released. It's called Gay Nation, a gay game for gays, in parentheses, gays only. That's the name of the game there.
Wow.
And that will be out in 2 days from this recording.
Interesting. I don't know what to feel about the kind of, I know everyone tries to make attention-grabbing titles. But titles when when I make up a title for like a book or when I'm playing Sims and my character writes a book, I always come up with a crazy name. And I just think to myself, if this were a real book, would it be there just to sell copies via the name, or is it there because it's a legitimate thing, or is it both? It's yeah, they're reducing their audience already, and someone around have ideas. Yeah, it's a strange thing. I feel like the younger folks, when they make a game, they want to make the craziest, catchiest name that they can possibly think of, and you see that in indie games pretty much only. I don't know.
I would read the description for that game, but I think I would get in trouble if I did actually read what it's about. So I'll let you guys look that up for yourself.
Look at that. Word of mouth advertising already. You know what? It's so intriguing, but I can't tell you about it. You have to go look it up yourself.
Now, there is one game that's coming out that I know. It's called Last Encounter. It's a top-down roguelike shmup that I got a press key for. I'm under embargo for a few more days. Let me see. When is it? When does that wrap up? Oh, Monday. So tomorrow I'll be able to do a first look on that one. So that one, it actually has some pretty good variants to it. And it's a legitimate title, too. So that also gives it a plus for this section. Let's see. What else do we have? Trailblazers. Why does that sound familiar? Oh, it's a racing game. Let's see. Other than that one, I'm not seeing... There's a game called Lingerie's Office, okay. RPG Golf. That doesn't sound too bad. Let's see. Russian Gangsta in Hell. I think that Gay Nation game may be the winner for this week. Unless something else comes up in the next minute. Gansel and Hurdle. They're reversing Hansel and Gretel. Okay. A game called Epiphany. That's the only thing we got. Gotta be an exciting game. Mutants Must Die. Doesn't sound too bad. Game called 69. A game called Tad That Alien Dude. Okay. Nothing is crazy right now. It may actually be a quiet week this time, Rob. Can you believe it?
No, I'm very disappointed. Come on, indie game makers.
Attack
of segment out.
Attack of the Killer Furries. Okay. That's more like I would give like a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10 for craziness, at least at this point. Bullet Hell Advance, and 2 more pages, and then we'll get back to it. Righty Tighty. Okay. Yeah, nothing is crazy this time. Oh, what a shame here.
Yeah.
No. Oh wait, there's another squirrel-related game coming out, Psycho Squirrels.
Oh wow.
So maybe Squirrels is going to be the next that will take over Battle Royale, squirrel-related games.
We're gonna get Squirrel Simulator. Yeah, and then any number of RPGs based on squirrels. Point and clicks.
Let's see. Some disturbing titles, but they're not weird. Super Pillow Fight. And I think that's going to do it. Taco Gun. I have no idea what that's going to be about.
Alright, I gotta look that one up.
Okay, there's a game called Jesus vs. Muhammad. Okay. Please tell me that's going to be on Steam. Please tell me they're actually getting that one on there. Let's see. Yes, it's actually coming on Steam. That's great. Yeah, we're getting used to it. We're being numbed by it. Oh my. And that's actually going to be a Steam release. That's great. Oh man. And one more. Well, yeah, that's it. There are more. I could certainly spend the next 5 minutes just going down the list, but nothing is other than that Game Nation game. I think that's going to be our top. What do we call the prize here, Rob? What's our prize for this?
I'm trying to think of a good one, but all I can think of is just the Crazy Name Awards. I mean, that's just the dumbest name in the world. The Crazy Name Awards for crazy indie games with crazy names.
I'm sure El Gordo will think of. He'll come with a catchy name.
I leave that to the chat.
Wait, what? Wait, what the hell is this? Something just popped up here. A game called The Crack I Found That Taketh. What? What the hell? I don't even know how to describe this one. A 3D surreal horror game, but still combines fixed camera angles. Wait.
Oh, jeez.
Something's not right there. And you apparently play as a marshmallow. Okay then. Well, that was a. I don't even know what to say of that one.
Games designed in the morning after a fever dream. That's what that is. That is the genre.
That could be a new game jam. Everyone take some peyote, and then you'll think of a game idea, and then you have 24 hours to make it after you come down off of it.
Yeah.
But I guess for game design topics this week, is there anything that you're interested in talking about, Rob?
I don't suppose so. Like, the one that comes to mind is I had mentioned like Squirrel Simulator, but there was a game a while back. No, never mind. I think I'd already talked about it. I think someone on the channel brought it up. It's that horse SSX game. That one always comes to mind lately. It's just this nightmarish looking game that is also nightmarishly designed. A very bad game.
I guess for the chat, do you have any game design topics you would like Rob and I to talk about to, I guess, to take us into the back half of our stream? While we're waiting there, Trying to think if there's anything else that's really like striking me. Let's see. I know.
I did buy more games. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I did buy more games, which doesn't really help since I still haven't played Darkest Dungeon, which the last time I was on your show I told you that I bought, and then I forgot all about having bought it. So I'm gonna just check to see what I bought recently. It was the Daedalus pack, I think.
Let's see. I was trying to look up Dead Cells quickly just to see how that is coming along. And nothing else. I really want to play Dead Cells, but I just want to make sure it's out first before we get to it. That's a good topic, King. And before we get to it, I did record the Dissecting Design this week. That will be up for Monday. And for the folks watching this live, the VIP or the early recorded podcast is going to be my talk with, I forget his name, Chris something, where we talked about programming and engine design. That will be up Friday for everybody, and it will be up tomorrow for the VIP supporters. So be sure to watch that. But I think that's a good topic to wrap up the week on, character design. This is definitely another one of those unspoken elements when it comes, or underrated aspects up there with UI design. But yeah, it's very hard, I think, when it comes to creating a good character. I guess with the games that you've done publishing with Rob, I guess what do you think about when it comes to having that identifiable character for your game?
Most of the games I've worked on don't really have. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. I guess I'd have to go back to my days working with Disney on educational games and Way Forward. I did that there as well. We use very popular brands of IP. With Disney, that makes a ton of sense. Then when I was at Way Forward, we did Nickelodeon games, so SpongeBob SquarePants. Now, the character depth in those is just going to be automatically massive, or it should be, because the background of every character in the Disney universe, and the characters in most of the cartoons on Nickelodeon have very deep backgrounds and have been very well rounded in terms of their backstories and that kind of thing.
And their appeal too.
That appeal to customers as well. So having that and using that is very easy. You have all that stuff. Now, when you actually have to make a game with it, I mean, you basically have to figure out how to create that from scratch. And do you even care about your characters? There was Plants vs. Zombies, for some reason, is popping in my head because that guy who runs the store, whose name I can't remember, it's like Crazy Hank or something loopy like that. Like, that's a very cool character, and he's just a throwaway character who just exists for the purpose of selling you items that you need to progress through the game. And that character, he like wears a pot on his head, and he's loopy and he says weird things, and that is an engaging character. Whereas normally a shopkeeper is just a throwaway, even in games like RPGs, which are supposed to have good character and story depth. So it's weird. It is very important, I feel like, just as like the environment and all that kind of stuff, to really build out your game and flesh out that that world you're trying to create. And a character is the best way of doing that, especially side characters. Yeah.
And I think one of the more interesting aspects and what makes it so hard is that sometimes you never know who's going to stand out. And we see this in TV shows all the time, where, a side character becomes so popular, then they go, oh, let's make this character into their own show, or let's give them a spin-off, or stuff like that. And when it comes to video games, I guess this is one of the more interesting aspects, because we see this with thank you, Isaac, with essentially two different kinds of approaches. You have kind of a brand being more the focus, stuff like Auction Not Included, I'm trying to think of some other really good examples. Cook Serve Delicious would be another good one as well. But then there are games that try to tie it to a character. Don't Starve, with their unique character designs there. Oddworld being a perfect example, with Abe, the Stranger, and so on. But it's kind of like when it goes back to picking popular games, it's kind of hard to tell unless you have a pre-existing character. As you mentioned, with Nickelodeon and Disney being a given, but Mario and Nintendo being another good example, When you have Nintendo's whole back catalog of characters, why create a new one? And it was one of those things that was very interesting about the whole ARMS. You know ARMS, right, for Nintendo Switch?
Yeah, I never did much with it. I've just heard of it.
Well, ARMS was kind of designed, again, in kind of this, like, throwaway world. You know, they describe the story as one day, people just started to have their arms have springs attached to their arms. Nobody knows why. So they thought to fight with it. Splatoon being another good point. Like, it's very hard sometimes to know when these characters will stick. But after the success of ARMS, people were saying, Nintendo, we want to know more about this backstory. The same for Splatoon. And now they're kind of like scrambling to flesh these characters out. I mean, Smash Brothers being another big point. The whole IPO of Smash Brothers wasn't a very big, elaborate story. It was, watch Mario beat the crap out of Link. And then beat the crap out of Solid Snake. And Pikmin, and so on. And it's kind of weird about how you market these games. Now, I guess for you, Rob, with some of the publishing you've done in the past, how important are these characters in the grand scheme of things when it comes to that appeal?
Well, like I said, with IP, with existing IP, and you just mentioned this, like that's it's just like having a big star in a movie. You know, something that's recognizable and that immediately draws. Like you get an automatic number of sales just for having that character in your game because that's how popular it is. Now, creating a character again, for some reason you brought up Smash Brothers, and that triggered like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. Those are just, I mean, the characters now have very deep backstories, and all you see is them fighting each other, but they have these deep backstories that have been well thought out, and now each one of those characters you have a favorite one. I had a favorite one when I was a kid. I always liked Raiden, but that was mostly because of God of Thunder. That sounded really cool to me. Do you think gameplay makes the character more likable, or the character makes the game more likable? That's a good question.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about that myself. I think for me, I think the character may make the game more likable. I think, as you said, back to brain recognition. But I think it's one of those cases where the best games tend to integrate character and gameplay together. Again, going back to Oddworld, for instance, Abe is this, decrepit character who can't fight, and his only real power is his mind and, being crafty with being able to get around the guards. And that's integrated into the gameplay. I guess here's a one. What do you think about God of War? You just mentioned God of Thunder there, or, with Raiden, but where do you think Kratos falls in on that?
That's weird, because I inherently thought he was relatively unlikable and bland, but it was the gameplay that made with that first point that first part of the question, the gameplay itself kind of made the character a name, because really you're just this dude who walks around and violently murdering things. And now they're adding more story to it and stuff. I've never oh, gotcha. I don't know too much about that backstory of Jumpman, but I understand what you're talking about. But like, yeah, for God of War, that character really didn't have much, and now they've added a lot of story and stuff, and I'm still not really interested. The game itself is defined as something that I think is what drives its popularity, not the character. But I could be wrong now. I have not played at all the latest, but the ones I played in the past, long ago, admittedly, just did not give me any kind of like. It's just like Grand Theft Auto. I didn't care about the main character.
Yeah. I
cared about running around and stealing cars and stuff,
and listening to random music too.
Yeah, and listening to random music. Perfect. But that, the main characters in those never appealed to me. It was the worlds you were in.
And here's an interesting point, like gaming with the fighting game analogy. We've seen this with like different characters becoming popular based on what their moves can do. I mean, everybody remembers Liu Kang for the bicycle kick, or Scorpion with the get over here, and hell, Sub-Zero. I mean, how many people have done the freeze an enemy uppercut combo in their life there? And like in these cases, like again, the power or the gameplay translates into that character. But then the question remains, what do you do from there? You mentioned, of course, with fighting games. I mean, today, every fighting game has this immensely elaborate backstory for all their characters. I mean, Mortal Kombat in particular. I mean, how many different plot points did they set up with MK10? Right. With one character, falling in love with another one character being gay, one character trying to save her father, and so on and so forth. And then you have all the old characters with their brand new backstories. Sub-Zero now runs the whole Ninja Academy. Now Sub-Zero and Scorpion are friends, apparently. It's just crazy like that.
Yeah, and it's still very... You separate all that, and the game is fine. You don't lose anything by losing that backstory. It's just kind of an interesting gravy type thing. Now, for the opposite, where you do have a character that kind of brings the game together, like the spin-offs you had mentioned, Yoshi's Island and that kind of stuff. Oh, it's like you play Super Mario. What did Yoshi start? Was it 3 or was it World?
Super Mario World was when Yoshi first appeared.
Well, I guess you have that weird... Technically, there was a Yoshi-esque character in 2, which was just an enemy. But Yoshi becomes his own character, and you have Luigi getting his own game, and everybody's getting their own games, and it's all spin-offs, and those characters are the ones that are driving that new game. I can only imagine that. It's just like Super Mario 2. It just brought up. That game existed as I forget the name of it originally. Do you remember offhand? With 4 different characters.
Doki something? I don't know.
Yeah, I do not recall. But they just plugged in the Mario characters, and suddenly the game is immensely popular as a Mario game. So in that one, the characters define the game, as opposed to the other way around. It was totally random. It did not make sense with the Mario quote universe, but hey, they went with it, and there's a lot of lovable things from that particular title that just do not exist in the others. The music being one of them.
Yep. Rabbids as well be another big point there. And, I mean, speaking about characters driving the gameplay, look at Dragon Ball FighterZ. I mean, that game would not have gotten anywhere near the attention if they just use a brand new IP.
Yeah.
And half that appeal has been the fact that it is a legitimately great Dragon Ball game, or Dragon Ball in the universe. I guess it's considered Dragon Ball Super now. Again, we'll leave that up to the anime experts to decide. But, like, right there, they use the characters to kind of define the moveset. And it's very interesting there, because they use each character to kind of build around a specific fighting game mechanic. So, like, I know someone like what is it, Android 18, like the big heavy guy, he's more of a close range, like grappler, bruiser kind of one, while someone smaller like Gotenks, or I guess even like Vegeta, is more about, blasting people and getting in quick combos. So they kind of use the existing character to build the foundation for the fighting game mechanics off of it.
Yeah, and that is definitely interesting. It definitely makes it makes the game richer for that, when the character actually makes sense with regards to the gameplay. And we missed an obvious one that you were just talking about, Binding of Isaac. Like, that character is the game. The game is Isaac, because it's all in his head for the most part. It's all his mental anguish, and that is the game, and that is the gameplay. So that particular character really did drive the game, and while Isaac himself is not like, you don't say, well, Isaac was my favorite character, because you don't think of him like that. But it really is. It truly is the game. If it was just a regular old roguelite without the whole, themed everything, then I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't have been as interesting. Maybe it would have been. It's hard for me to say.
Yeah. And again, I think going back to the original question, though, how, like, this is again like the great philosophical debate. How do you create a compelling character? Is it just by how they look? Is it a gameplay element, or is it a combination of both? Because as we know, especially for people who do marketing, the first thing people do is look at something. And if it's not compelling at that first look, they're not going to dig into it to figure out if there is any, nuggets of greatness there.
Right.
Like again, with something like Binding of Isaac, or even the games from Invisible Ink, or I'm sorry, Clay Entertainment, each one of their games has a very striking look to it. And when you see that, it's like, what is this interesting thing? Like, I want to know more about it.
Yeah, and it's weird, especially in games, because in
Mm-hmm.
games you are the player, you are the avatar, right? So how does the game manipulate that, or figure that out? Like, okay, so I'm playing this one character, and I had this problem with Final Fantasy VIII, whereas Final Fantasy VII, all the characters were relatively likable. In eight, the main character is this emo, like overly anguished kid who obviously didn't have much hardship in his life, just was, all whatever, for the sake of it. And that was very, like, for me, is like, it's a role playing game. I'm playing this character, and I do not identify with this character at all. So how do you play with that? And then just an interesting aside there is, so you play with these characters, they don't mean much, but when you go to Metroid, Samus, the character, had zero identity until the end of the game. Like, it's just an action figure, and then it's like, oh, it was a girl the whole time, and then you're suddenly like, oh wow, this character Samus now has a backstory that I was completely unaware of, and it blew my mind a little bit because of the times, and from there you can grow it a little bit, but even then, it's a character without being much of a character. There's like not much depth there, and yet people have read it. I mean, there is this backstory that really is based entirely on her gender.
Mm-hmm. And this is something we talked about. I know, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, regarding when people try to, attract people based on, having very polarized or politicized characters, saying, this character is the token black character, or this is the token gay, and this is what we were talking about, that you have to be really careful when you do that. Good character design. I know we've spent. I know I did a podcast like a long time ago about this, but good character design is about creating the character first. Like, you don't write good characters just by using gender or nationality as a part of their personality. There has to be a compelling character underneath that, or it's just going to look as, you're just trying to check things off on a list.
Yeah, no, it does, and creating a character is not that easy.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel bad for game writers. I always felt bad for people who write in video games, whether they're a good writer or a bad writer, or they're just, whatever. Like, you play something like Grim Dawn or Torchlight, and there's so much backstory that does not matter in the least, and I don't care about any of it.
Yeah.
And the characters don't really matter. They could be anything, just like we're talking about with action games. But to actually make something that is rounded and deep and actually is integrated with gameplay, you really have to make that interactive aspect of the game, like with the fighting games we were talking about earlier, make sense with the character. Like, you have to give that character limitations. Mirror's Edge kind of popped into my head. I know that character herself had some depth and had some backstory, especially, again, as you reach the end of the game, you realize most of this. But in reality, during the gameplay, it's just an action character, just the player with themselves.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up ARPGs there, Rob, because that brings up a really good point. Something like Diablo, for instance. Diablo, like, there's a huge backstory to the Diablo series, as anyone who's played it knows. But again, do you really care about that? Are you really thinking about what Diablo's doing when you're busy, smashing through groups of enemies looking for the next green pickup, or waiting for a legendary to drop in a greater rift? And the story of Diablo, I was kind of interested in, like, the first or second game, but the third game tried to put a greater emphasis on the characters, and it just didn't really work for me. I think one of my favorite jokes was when Adria was teasing you about, I don't remember her name, the girl who died, who was really like the spawn of Adria, but she was like teasing about, oh, you couldn't save her, and I'm like, who is she talking about again? I'm sorry, I don't really care. I'm looking at this legendary sword right now, or I just killed you with my fully set ancient build.
Yeah, and that like Final Fantasy the original, like that, the characters there, which did evolve into the other Final Fantasy games, Red Mage, White Mage, Black Mage, Warrior. It, that's all you needed to know, because it defined their limitations and how you would use them in combat. Isaac's comment about that. I think that's an interesting way to approach things. It really is. Jumpman's question: how does one convey backstory through marketing without spoiling the game? Whew, I don't know. It's weird because like that's how movies do it, right? Somehow.
Like, I think that really gets into some really good marketing, and even just understanding film or TV or like advertising. Like, I'm trying to think of some examples. When Blizzard did the reveal for StarCraft 2, like the meme coming out, in his whole armored glory, it says, it's like "Miss Me" or "It's about damn time." I think that would be a good point. Or, or even something like what we do in like the horror genre, where the advertisement is basically someone being killed by whoever the creature is, like as a way of getting you excited that way. But yeah, it's very hard, again, without spoiling the entire game, because we see this a lot, especially with teaser trailers today, that kind of go through all the big points of the movie, and then you know what's going to happen. Like, it's very easy to extrapolate what's happening based on what they show you.
Especially in this era of the fanatic, fan base, who can take a trailer and just pick it apart, like just investigate, yes. Look, all the little hints in the background and everything.
This guy's going to die. This is going to happen. That one frame that you saw, like a tattoo on this guy's arm, that tells us all this is going to happen. Speaking of which, I'm slowly but surely catching up to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I just watched Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and Thor Ragnarok on Friday.
Those are on Netflix, right?
Oh, no, the movies, not the Netflix shows.
No. The Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is on Netflix.
Oh,
really?
I
thought, because it appeared on Netflix, because now I need to watch. Actually, I haven't. It's embarrassing. I've not watched Guardians of the Galaxy 1. Oh. I'll admit it. That's my secret.
Well, at least I beat you, Rob.
Yeah,
I'm still like 8 months behind everybody else. I'll watch Black Panther probably by November, and then most likely by April of next year, I'll catch Infinity Wars. So I just gotta avoid spoilers until then.
They tell too much of the trailers. Yes, indeed.
But getting back to King's question there, it is very tough to do that. And I think one of the advantages I think video games have, at least in some aspects, is they can just go for a full gameplay trailer. Just show 10 seconds of footage, or even something like what we see with what they did with XCOM and Phoenix Point, where the trailer is just basically the developer playing the game for 30 minutes. I mean, that got me very excited about XCOM 2 when I watched Jake Solomon play through that original level on IGN that first time.
Right.
So you can do something like that, but I think one thing I think both of us have really missed in terms of designing compelling characters would be Double Fine. Double Fine has certainly been banking on their unique characters, from Psychonauts to Brutal Legend, and whatever they're working on, or Psychonauts 2. And like they can
even before Double Fine, when they were in LucasArts, the same. Yeah, those characters were very deep, and they added a lot to the game.
And again, it raises that very chicken and the egg situation. Did the gameplay come first and the characters were written to correspond to it? Or did they come with the characters first and then the gameplay was kind of conformed to it? Because I know there are developers who do that, who will come up with a character and then go, okay, this guy's really cool, now how do we build a game around him?
Well, I feel like when you talk about, and certainly Double Fines is, not quite point and click adventure. It does have adventure game roots and all that kind of stuff. But then when you do talk about something like an adventure game, it feels like the story is the most important aspect.
Oh yeah.
And so like with a role-playing game, it's kind of, people say, oh, it's a very deep story, whatever, but it's about the engine, and it's about how you move along in the game as well. In an adventure game, it's not. It's about experiencing the story and the characters. And any kind of, when you're a third person, when you're the player looking in, solving a problem, it's easier to take in the story. Whereas if you're playing the character as like the action star badass, well, you don't have to, like, the story is kind of secondary and in the background.
And yeah, you are right about that, Rob. I remember I spoke, I think, with Ron Gilbert and Gary Winnick, like right before Thimbleweed Park came out. I think they said they wrote the story first, and then they kind of used that to guide what kind of puzzles these characters would deal with. And it all really depends on what you're trying to convey. Now, here's a big question. For those of you watching this, I think for you too, Rob, would you consider the Souls series, again, Dark Souls and Bloodborne, as an example of good character design? Because, again, the characters aren't really the focus.
And I gotta say, with the Dark Souls and stuff, I had not played through those. The ones that I can, again, they're older, that I can reference are the Devil May Cry, Onimusha, that kind of stuff. Way older, yes, but it feels like it's along the same lines where they do have a lot of character that they built into it. But yeah, it's really all about the gameplay and the intriguing environments. I'm with you, Spirit. I don't have Dark Souls.
And Will Godo just said, if you take the world as a character, then yes, it is a very fleshed out place. But the characters, no. I mean, again, if you want to dig into hours of lore, then yes, there's a lot going on. But for most people, there's just not really all that there. The world itself can be a branding point. But, I mean, how many people really, want to know more about the Unnamed King? Or Champion Gundyr? Or any of the minor enemies?
Yeah, I do think that enemies are more likely to be interesting characters then, because they do have to have that personality that drives their gameplay style. Whether they be like very cocky and more mentally, so it's like a magic and a ranged type of thing, or if they're big and angry and stuff and they attack you with physical attacks. I think that the character plays a big role in how you feel about that battle. Because if you want a good enemy, they have to be mean and they have to be jerks. They have to have a reason for being your enemy. That helps drive the story. But the hero, not so much.
I would say the Doom guy is probably a better fleshed out character than any of the main guys in the Dark Souls series at this point. Because there's more of a personality to him, and that is reflected in what's going on. Yeah. And I think that's another big point about characters, is that in order for you to have a good character, they have to be influencing the actual gameplay or the story. This goes back to what we said with Diablo. The various characters you play as in Diablos in the various Diablo games are just blank slates. Yes, they have vocals and they say stuff, but really, do you know the motivation of the witch doctor? Or do you care how the sorceress feels when she's killing enemies? They're just kind of there for you to put your own spin on. But it's the same thing like with the whole silent protagonist like Gordon Freeman. Who really cares what Gordon Freeman is thinking about what's going on when they're playing the games? Yes, he has an elaborate backstory. He's I think he's an astrophysicist and all that, but how much of that is really conveyed in game? Like, Gordon doesn't stop, the game doesn't stop for Gordon, relate what's going on to a physics problem.
Right. Yeah, and along those lines, I feel like, again, that character more drove a lot of just the simple fact that he was kind of a nerdy scientist type drove a lot of his popularity. When I'm playing it, I'm like, no, this guy's like an arms expert and a military grade kind of.
He can use any weapon he picks up. He can throw grenades. He can beat people to death with a crowbar. How many scientists do you know can do that?
Right, but that kind of, as a gamer, you probably aren't that. You're probably not an athletic person. So when you see you can relate to the character and go and fulfill your beat 'em up fantasies at the same time. I don't know how much that actually plays into the popularity of the game. The game was a very good game, but hey, it's there.
And even a good example of a character who did infer on the gameplay would be someone like Solid Snake from the Metal Gear Solid series.
Yeah.
I mean, from minute one, they were building Solid Snake as to be, the franchise point or the anchor point. I mean, fully voice acted by David Hayter. The whole, everything about that character inferred onto the gameplay, the tactical espionage action, and so on. So you care about what happens to Solid Snake because he is involved in the story. It's not just a case of what was that game that I just played? Oh no, what was it? Or something like in South Park, where in the two RPG games, the new kid doesn't say a word. Like, he's literally, the whole joke is he is a blank slate. Let me see.
Yeah, I agree, Isaac. I feel along those same lines. The conversation has made me think that some characters that aren't memorable have done a good job at making the person feel like they are the character doing the actions. I can totally agree with that, because you had just mentioned Solid Snake definitely made that game, but like if you have other games where you're just kind of sneaking around and stuff like Thief or Assassin's Creed, I mean, what was there? What was there with Assassin's Creed besides this weird, crazy backstory that? Well, I'm not going to go into my feelings on that, but like Thief and that kind of thing, it's just you're just a nothing. You're a nothing controlled by a person.
Yeah. Like, a good example would be the game I just played, Super Daryl Deluxe. I don't know if you saw me or saw any videos of me playing that one, Rob.
No.
But that is a kooky game. The whole point is you play a protagonist who doesn't say a word. He's just literally going like this the whole time. That's it. And that's like the whole joke. Like, he has no conversation whatsoever. And everyone is just like saying all these things like, Daryl, how dare you? What was your grand plan this whole time? He's just like,
yeah, ...
Yeah, and like even him or even that guy had more personality than some characters, just because like how they reference it, and again the style of the world. And even came with a kick-ass battle theme song at the end of that game, if anyone looked up the trailers for it. But it goes back to our main point that it's very hard to figure out what makes these characters stand out. And I think at the end of the day, the character, like the best characters, have to infer on the gameplay in some way, shape, or form, and vice versa. Because we've talked about before, when it comes to this kind of appeal, that there are a lot of games, like as you said, like Mario. Like, would you consider Mario to be a blank slate character at this point, or do you think there is a personality there?
I think he has a personality now. I mean, certainly when he started as a character, it was just, back in those days, there wasn't much in the way of backstory or whatever. It was just all about your reflexes and your ability to score points. But certainly he's become more of a friendly, like Mickey Mouse type, someone who's generally speaking optimistic and happy, and not like there's violence, but it's, quote, cartoon violence, and it seems like it's all in good fun kind of violence, which is weird.
It's not like Batman when he knocks someone off the roof, that kind of violence.
Exactly. You're not going to see like you could argue that they're the same kind of gameplay. It's just one guy is just has this like bottled up anger inside that stems from his childhood, whereas Mario just seems like, oh yeah, what's there? I'm stomping on Koopas, whatever, it's fun.
How do you know Mario doesn't have a tragic backstory? Maybe he's been holding it in this whole time. And just in one game, all of a sudden Mario will just like take the hat off, just start cursing, and he'll just finally explode on everyone.
Yeah, and I think Spirit makes a good point to follow up with Isaac's point. It's the characters don't matter so much, but the world, it does add to the world creation and the gameplay. But yeah, Mario, just like some of the fan art for Mario where you see him in very dark scenarios, I think that adds to the enjoyment of that, because he is only presented as a happy-go-lucky kind of character. Yes.
And that's the interesting point what Spirit just said regarding the... Hold on, my phone is ringing. Let me just close that. There we go. But
that's true. He was.
But I just lost my train of thought there. What was I about to say?
You're talking about Mario Spirits. You're reacting to Spirits' comment.
About when it comes to backstories there, that they're just there for the frame device, and we really don't see or hear much of it after the game has started. And that's one of the major complaints I think we have about trying to flesh out these characters. Like, do we really care that this character was abandoned as a child, or this one lost her son in an accident, when none of that makes a difference when we're actually in game?
Mm-hmm.
And I just had and the point I want to bring up would be from the Surge. I know I've said this many times over, but the Surge begins with you dealing with a character who is physically handicapped. And it begins with this idea like there's going to be a big point about what it means to regain your mobility and how that affects your psyche. But then, 10 minutes in, that's all thrown out the window for Dark Souls-esque combat for the next 10 to 20 hours.
Yeah, it is. It's all throwaway, and that's why I feel bad for game writers. I feel like the only way to write effectively in a game is just what we've been talking about with King and Isaac and sorry, I gotta scroll up. Spirit. That it's the environment. If the environment is engaging and invites you in to experience the gameplay and sets a stage, then that is where the writing is. It's not in reading text on a screen. It's not in knowing what happened before the story happened, before what you're experiencing happened. It's just all about what is happening and how the world, how you are embraced by the world that has been created by the developers. I think that's where the writing is. It's so hard to pull that off, and it mostly actually goes towards a design title than a writing title, because I feel like writing text in a game, just unless it's an adventure game, a point and click adventure game where that's where all the humor and the interest comes in, then it's just whatever.
Yeah, I want to respond to King's comment there, but there's 2 points I want to bring up before I forget them. The first one is, speaking about, those kinds of characters and trying to bring them into the world, we see the kind of over-the-top things work really well, like your Duke Nukem's or Lo Wang from Shadow Warrior, where the character's personality is a major part of what they're seeing. Yes, you're running around shooting guys and, blowing things up, but you got the characters, making wisecracks the whole time. And that kind of lends into the personality. But, as you said, it's very hard to do that with, a super serious character, or even something that's, very jokey, like a Mario or Sonic kind of character. They've tried to do that with Sonic, and it's had some very cringe-worthy results.
Yeah, those are weird characters.
Mm-hmm. And the other point I want to bring up, again, going back to when you try to throw this stuff in and it doesn't work to the gameplay, my go-to example would be the recent Tomb Raider games, where Lara Croft's supposed to be suffering from PTSD and scared, she's not sure what she's doing, and then she grabs her bow and creates grenade arrows and starts headshotting people from 30 feet away.
Yeah, I mean, that backstory presents a lack of, would suggest that your character's going to have a lack of confidence going into any action scenario. And that is engaging, and that can be some really interesting gameplay. But yeah, you just kicked it to the curb. As soon as you can start doing acrobatics in very high tense situations, well, there you are.
Now, the question, and this I think will take us to King's comment, what happens when there is a specific gameplay element to the story or to how the character grows? King's example there, you can have, we see this in RPGs where you have a backstory, your character was raised in the circus, +3 to charisma. Your character was beaten as a child, -2 to personality. When you start attaching actual gameplay elements to your story, to your personalities, does that make things better, or does it make things even more artificial?
Well, and that's the chicken and the egg question. Is that stat decrease or increase, are you just trying to explain it? Or is that stat increase come from the explanation? As a story goes, and you're like, okay, well, I really need this character to, have some kind of horrible thing happen to them, or else the story gets boring. But then if that happens, then how does that affect the gameplay? That kind of, I feel like if you really flesh that out, that concept, that thought, it'll present itself in the game and the player might actually feel it. But yeah, when you just do it that way, it feels like you're just trying to create chaos in the gameplay world and just explain it away.
Or there's also the point about min-maxing, because as we know, for a lot of these games, you don't really need to care about these backstories. You can make your character a specific way, and that's the most optimized route. We've talked about this before with the whole idea of good and evil. And like I said, I hated the whole idea of morality sliders in video games, and that was the buzz trend from like the early thousands. Because it's just completely artificial storytelling. You're an evil jerk. Well, but wait, you just gave $100 to an orphan. That pushed your, morality just up enough. Now you're a righteous, virtuous person who's going to go around and save puppies. And then, of course, none of that matters at the end if you choose, the final choice. Do you be good? Do you be evil? And then all your other choices don't matter. And again, it just becomes about the gameplay. This choice, it may be better to be evil. This one better be good. And it just makes things feel very artificial. I think once again, it robs the character of any kind of identity when you go that route.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's so hard. Again, this is the writing aspect. It's so hard to create content for a variety of different outcomes. Like, you create content for, okay, he's good or he's bad. Okay, that's two. But let's say you want someone who's neither. Well, that's a third one, or a fourth, or a 10th. Like, it's to create that. If you're in the in between, it's unlikely you're going to have as an end game that is as not redeeming, but like as interesting as being either the total evil or the total good guy. Like, what's the interest in being in the middle? What's the interest in writing that line of like normalcy? Like, nobody's perfectly good or perfectly evil. So how do you reward the player for reacting as a human being would?
Oh man, I did a quick time check. We were just about an hour and 20 in. If we start talking about morality and shades of gray, we'll be here for like another 2 hours here. But yeah, your point is apt there, Rob, about it's very boring to write pure good and pure evil characters, because it goes back to what we were saying earlier with character personalities. If your whole character personality is, woman, or black character, or Chinese, or anything like that, you're not really building a character. You're just building a stereotype, or you're building, I can't think of the term I wanted to use there, when it's just like a catch-all.
Well, there's no, I don't see any issues with doing it that way, since, if that's all you want to do, then that fine, that's great. It rings true for a whole audience. But it isn't a character. It's just, it's just a new avatar, and that's totally fine, but you can't call it a story.
Yeah. And again, like we've said this before, but like the more interesting morality decisions are when there are those shades of gray. But to have that work, the character actually thank you, tropes and characters. Thank you, King. I think I was thinking of tropes there. But you actually have to have your character have a personality to it. Like this to me is the big difference between something like Geralt in the Witcher series versus the idea of Shepard in Mass Effect. Now, as you know, for anyone who's played Mass Effect or who's seen footage, you define who Shepard is. That's the big selling point. Do you want yours to be the cocky, arrogant Shepard? Do you want to be a take no prisoners badass? And the whole difference between male and female Shepard. But at the end of the day, though, no matter how this character is written or whatever dialogue choices they choose, you're still the one who's creating that personality. Like, they don't really have a personality. They're just being built off of what you say. But the opposite of that would be something like Geralt. In each of the Witcher games, yes, the player makes choices, but they're always filtered through Geralt's sensibilities and what he wants to do. Like, Geralt isn't going to do something completely out of character because he has his own personality. But you can kind of choose what he's thinking about and how that relates to him. Whether he supports, humans in the first game or the magical creatures. Who he decides to spare in The Witcher 2. And I'm sure there are plenty of other options like that in The Witcher 3. But the reason why it works is that Geralt is a morally gray character. He's not evil, he's not, completely virtuous, but he occupies that niche, so it allows him to walk both lines.
Yeah, and it's hard to create those. A lot of effort, a lot of investment in creating those stories and I feel like from a game company standpoint, it's not always worth it because you can miss. You can totally miss.
And I think this goes back to the original point about why we got on this conversation, is that when you create a compelling character, it does so much to help your game. We talked about branding earlier. There's a reason why companies go for these brands, because it pretty much creates a license to print money. If you create the next Bugs Bunny, or the next Mario, or hell, even the next Master Chief or Doom guy, that becomes something that is easily identifiable and easily bankable as well. But as you said, the risk is you can spend all this time and money and art and voice acting on a character that nobody likes.
Yeah. And that does go towards your comment, Spirit, about TV series and movies, because they suffer the same problem.
Yep. And again, you just never know. I mean, it's the same thing with game development as a whole. You don't know what games are going to succeed sometimes. There's a lot you can do to mitigate those risks, but at the end of the day, it's still an unknown.
Yeah.
Trying to think if there's anything else before we wrap up. I guess, do you have anything you want to add in about the topic, Rob?
Not about the topic. I did want to mention, because I took advantage of this earlier Friday, I think, that there is a bundle from Daedalus that's their whole catalog for $13.
Is that on Steam or?
Yeah, on Steam. And it's Quest, Blackguards 2. So a lot of games that you may never have heard of, but I had a couple of them on my wish list. Made it worth it. So
here.
Anytime you can get a giant bundle like that for a very inexpensive price, then it's worth looking at, just to see if it seems like something I want to jump in.
Mm-hmm.
So share the wealth, I say.
Here's an odd question. Why is the first Blackguards not on sale and Blackguards 2 is considered discounted?
Yeah, and the funny thing is, if you buy them all separate, it's way more expensive than just getting the 90% off discount.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if I own any of those games at this point. Who knows? Probably. It's somewhere.
You probably do.
Mm-hmm.
I did not, but you probably would be looking at, oh, I happen to have all of these, turns out.
But I guess to wrap up for the cast then, when it comes to good character design, again, I think for me, it has to have some kind of gameplay elements to it. Just, I guess another good example would be, I forget his name, Alex Yu from Prey 2016. In that game, or Morgan, I forget which one we played as, but regardless, the Yu that we play as in Prey, there is a personality to this character. It's seen in the video, the archival footage you find, but once again, when you play that game, it's all on you. Now, the game kind of got around that by the fact that the whole point of Prey 2016 was the fact that you're trying to define who this character is. But that's not an example that can be used for every game. And again, like, to me, if you want to have a good character, they have to relate to the gameplay in some element to it. Otherwise, all that backstory is just filler. Like, yes, this character may have had a hard and brutal life, or they may be, psychologically scarred, but it doesn't matter if we're playing this game, we're just happily jumping around and bouncing off of enemies.
Yeah.
But I think with that, it is getting a little bit late. At least we're over our hour mark, so I think we'll wrap it up here. So, for tonight, I'll be trying to find a classic game to play, and we'll see if we can get a bigger turnout for the streams. And, of course, for people watching, if they want to follow you, Rob, are you doing any streaming coming up?
Maybe. Just twitch.tv/IndieVoyage Rob. The only thing I want to plug is the project I've been working on at 2K, which is NBA 2K League. It's an esports with NBA 2K18. It's interesting if you're interested at all, whether to hate on it or possibly enjoy it or see what's unique about it. Every weekend for the next several months, they're playing through the season. So that's /NBA 2K League on Twitch.
All right.
That's it.
Awesome. And I'll be back, like I said, later tonight. If you guys have any suggestions for goals for the Patreon or games to Let's Play, please let me know. And if you would like to join our Discord channel, again, the basic tier is now open to everybody. And what I can do for the new folks watching, I'm going to post the invite link right into the chat. And again, if you want to find it, it is on the Patreon site and as well as in the description below. But for the new folks watching, here you go. We basically just hang out and talk game design topics. But if you haven't joined, it is right there. And yeah, I think with that, we'll wrap it up. So I'll be back later tonight. Be sure to tune into the Dissecting Design tomorrow. And for the VIP supporters, they'll be getting this discussion as well as the podcast up early and ad-free. But I think that's all I want to say. So do you have anything to close us out on, Rob?
No, this was a good conversation. I just like all of them, I thoroughly enjoyed it, but I feel like this one we hit a lot of good notes.
Awesome. So we'll wrap things up for today. We'll be back live next Sunday around 3 p.m. Eastern for another chat. Thanks again for tuning in, everybody, and I will see you all later tonight. See ya.